A little girl's face appears on a surveillance screen. She is standing in the back of a delivery van, a van she had no reason to be inside. Her blue jeans have flowers embroidered on the legs. She is not crying. She is not running. She is just standing there watching the man in the driver's seat in front of her. He is focused on the road. She does not know what is coming. Neither did anyone who loved her. On the 30th of November 2022, in a tiny Texas town called Paradise, a place so small it barely appears on most maps, a 7-year-old girl named Athena Strand walked outside after school to play in the country fields she loved. She never came back inside. And when her family finally called the police, when the helicopter started circling the trees at dusk, when 300 strangers drove in from across Wise County with horses and dogs and four-wheelers to find a child they had never met, every single one of them had the same question. Where is she? The answer was already out there, somewhere in the dark. And the man who knew exactly where she was had already told investigators his version of events. He said it was an accident. He said he panicked. He said he never meant for any of it to happen. What the cameras inside his van showed was something else entirely. This is what happened in those final hours of Athena Strand's life. And this is the question that still does not have a clean answer. When a man makes a choice in a moment of panic, does that excuse destroy the intent, or does it just describe it? Paradise, Texas is not a metaphor. It is a real place. Population roughly 500 people, 60 miles northwest of Dallas, set into the rolling, wooded countryside of Wise County, where the roads go by numbers instead of names, and the nearest Walmart is a 30-minute drive. People who live there know their neighbors. They wave from their driveways. They do not lock their doors in the middle of the afternoon. This is the kind of town where kids still run wild outside. Athena Presley Monroe Strand was 7 years old, and by all accounts she was made exactly for a place like Paradise. She loved the color pink. She loved Christmas. She loved mud and worms and the feeling of grass under bare feet. Her stepmother, Ashley Strand, would later tell a jury about a photograph she kept on her phone. Athena grinning from ear to ear, head to toe in mud, absolutely thrilled about some worms she had found. That was Athena. She had moved to Paradise in May of 2022. Before that, she had been living with her mother, Maitland Gandy, in Oklahoma. But Maitland had gotten sick, and so Athena came to stay with her father, Jacob Strand, and his wife Ashley. What was meant to be a summer visit turned into something longer. Athena enrolled at Paradise Elementary in August. She made friends. She started settling in. Her teacher, Lindsay Thompson, would remember her students buzzing with excitement in the weeks before Thanksgiving, Christmas programs being rehearsed, holiday drawings going up on the walls. That last week of November, Thompson had assigned a journaling exercise as part of Red Ribbon Week. The topic was safety. How to stay safe, who to trust, what to do if something felt wrong. Athena wrote her entry the week she disappeared. Thompson didn't read it until the day after they found Athena's body. But we are not there yet. On the afternoon of Wednesday, November 30th, 2022, life in Paradise looked exactly like it always did. Jacob Strand had left on a hunting trip out of town. Ashley was inside, cooking dinner, their toddler underfoot. Athena's older sister was at a nearby relative's house getting help with homework. And Athena was supposed to be in her room sorting laundry? She didn't want to do laundry, so she went outside. She was 7. Of course she went outside. The property they lived on was 10 acres of open Texas countryside, shared with nearby family members, filled with the kinds of spaces a child could disappear into for an hour without anyone worrying. Ashley wasn't worried. She cooked dinner. She checked on the toddler. She assumed Athena was somewhere out on the land, doing what she always did, just being a kid in the country. By the time the food was on the table, it was close to 6:30 in the evening. Ashley called for Athena. No answer. She went to the door. No, Athena. She walked the property. She checked the obvious spots behind the barn, near the fence line, by the old abandoned trailer at the edge of the land. Nothing. Just the dark settling down over the fields. Just the wind. And there, sitting in front of that abandoned trailer, was a brown cardboard box. A delivery from Walmart. It had been left there earlier that day by a FedEx driver. Inside the box were Barbie dolls. Ashley had ordered them weeks ago. They were going to be Athena's Christmas present. Ashley barely registered the box. She was scanning the property, calling her stepdaughter's name, waiting for the sound of little feet running back through the grass. The sound never came. She called the police just before 7 p.m., and when the first officers arrived, when they started sweeping their flashlights through the trees at the edge of the property, a question floated up that nobody wanted to say out loud, yet not a question about where Athena was hiding, But whether she had been taken, the box by the trailer, the delivery driver, the exact time, that thread was already there. It would just take a little while to pull it. Tanner Lynn Horner was 30 years old in November of 2022. He worked as a contract delivery driver for FedEx, technically employed through a third-party company that contracted with FedEx to handle residential deliveries in the area northwest of Dallas. It was exactly the kind of job you picture when you picture a delivery driver. Routes, packages, GPS, knocking on doors, leaving boxes, moving on. On November 30th, he had a full route. One of the stops was the Strand property on County Road 3,573 inches Paradise. The package was a Walmart box. Inside, Barbie dolls, the kind marketed with a logo that reads, "You can be anything." Ashley Strand had ordered them weeks earlier, tucked away for Christmas morning. She had listed the delivery address as the Paradise property, and somewhere in FedEx's system, Tanner Horner's route had been assigned to include it. He arrived at the Strand property late in the afternoon. He pulled his van down the driveway, dropped the package by the abandoned trailer, and began backing out. What happened next is where the story breaks in two. The version Tanner Horner would eventually tell investigators goes like this. As he was backing out, he struck something. He got out. He saw that it was a child, Athena. She was on the ground. He panicked. He was afraid of getting in trouble, afraid of losing his job, afraid of what her parents would do when they found out. He put her in the van. He thought she wasn't seriously hurt. He just needed to calm down, figure something out. That is the version of events he offered. The Wise County District Attorney, James Stainton, had a different word for it. The only truthful thing that Tanner Horner told law enforcement, Stainton told jurors at trial, was that he killed her. Here is what the cameras inside the delivery van actually recorded. Athena Strand was alive and standing upright in the back of that van. She was not crumpled on the floor. She was not barely conscious. She was standing there in her flower-embroidered jeans, watching the man driving the vehicle. She did not appear to be injured. She told him her name. Investigators would later confirm this. She told him her name, Athena. And according to prosecutors, the very first thing Tanner Horner said to that 7-year-old girl after putting her in his vehicle was, "Don't scream or I'll hurt you." He said it twice. That is not panic speaking. Panic looks like a man getting out of his van and knocking on the front door of the house he just made a delivery to and saying, "I think I hit a child. Please call 911. Panic looks like pulling over to the side of the road and calling emergency services himself. Panic is shaking. Panic is crying. Panic is 1,000 things that end with a little girl being alive. What Horner did was different. He drove. And somewhere on that route, in the back of that FedEx van, with Athena Strand standing behind him, Tanner Horner made a decision that no explanation has ever fully explained. According to arrest warrants, he first tried to break her neck. When that didn't work, he used his hands. He weighed 250 pounds. She weighed 67. He would lead investigators to her body 2 days later, but before that happened, 300 people were already in the fields looking for her. If this video has been valuable to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone you love. It might matter more than you think. Lane Aiken had been the sheriff of Wise County for 6 years when the call came in about a missing child in Paradise. He was not even in Wise County that night. He was in Llano, roughly 2 hours south. But he turned his car around and drove back through the dark, because that is what you do when a 7-year-old goes missing and the night is getting cold. By the time he arrived, the search was already spreading. Texas Rangers were on scene. Fort Worth Police, Highway Patrol, game wardens, helicopters crisscrossing the sky above the property. And then, starting early on the morning of December 1st, something that Aiken would later struggle to put into words while testifying at trial, his lip trembling, his voice dropping just slightly before he caught himself. The community showed up. Citizens drove in from all parts of Wise County. They registered with emergency management, they brought four-wheelers, they brought horses, they brought dogs. 300 people, standing shoulder to shoulder in the fields, moving through the woods, calling a little girl's name into the trees. They did not know Athena Strand. They had never met her. They had seen her face on a missing persons alert, and they got in their cars. It was the kind of thing that makes you believe something good is still left in the world, even on the worst days. The search began on the Strand property and moved outward to a nearby church and firehouse. The community members worked alongside deputies and investigators. They searched outbuildings. They swept creek beds. They covered land that would have taken law enforcement weeks to reach alone in a matter of hours. But as the hours ticked forward, something was shifting inside the investigation. The thread that had been there from the very beginning, the delivery van, the timing, the box of Barbies sitting in front of the trailer, investigators had been pulling it quietly while the search teams moved through the fields. Texas Ranger Job Espinoza, who was assigned to Wise County at the time, had started making calls the night Athena disappeared. The family mentioned a package had been delivered around the time she went missing. A FedEx delivery. Espinoza requested the footage from the company that operated the van. When the footage came in, everything changed. Because the footage showed Athena alive. For a few hours agonizing, precious hours, that knowledge kept hope alive inside the investigation. If she was alive in the van, there was a chance. There was a window. If they could find Tanner Horner fast enough, if they could locate that van. The Amber Alert went out on December 1st at 2:10 inches the afternoon, 26 hours after Athena had last been seen alive. By that point, Tanner Horner had already been tracked down. Investigators had already been working the digital trail, his route data, his phone, the GPS records from the delivery van. They found him. When they asked him about Athena, he lied. He told them she had not been seriously injured. He told them he had seen a green van in the area. He told them Athena was not alive before he put her in the truck because he had backed over her. Ranger Espinoza looked at him and said nothing. He had already seen the video. Athena had been standing in that van. She had been alive when she got in. When they pressed Horner on where she was now, he paused. Then he said he would show them. There is a place in Wise County, southeast of Boyd, about 9 miles from the Strand property, where a cluster of bamboo grows thick off the side of a road. Bamboo in Texas is not natural. It doesn't just appear in the middle of the countryside. Someone planted it, once, and it spread and grew and eventually became a wall of green so dense that from the road you would drive right past it and never think twice. Tanner Horner rode in the back of a law enforcement vehicle on December 2, 2022, and directed them to that bamboo thicket. Athena Strand's body was found there. Sheriff Aiken made the announcement at a press conference that night. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. He did not need to say everything. People already knew what it meant when a sheriff held a press conference at 11 o'clock at night. She had been out there, in that bamboo, while 300 strangers walked her county looking for her. She had been out there while her stepmother stood in the driveway calling her name. She had been out there while her father drove back from his hunting trip, while her mother in Oklahoma waited for a phone call, while her teacher, Lindsay Thompson, stood in front of a classroom full of children who knew something was wrong, even if they couldn't say why. The classroom felt heavy. Thompson would testify at trial, more than 3 years later. She told jurors about Athena's final journal entry, the one she hadn't read until the day after they found her. It was about safety. It was part of Red Ribbon Week, a school program about making safe choices, staying away from strangers, knowing who to trust. Athena had illustrated hers. She had colored it carefully. She had turned it in the week she disappeared. There is no word for what it means that a 7-year-old's final school assignment was about staying safe from strangers. Language breaks down somewhere around that fact. You can look at it directly and still not fully hold it. What you can hold is this. Athena Strand was a child who listened in class. A child who could have a rough day and still end the afternoon by telling her teacher, "I love you and we will have a better day tomorrow." A child who got excited about worms and mud and Christmas mornings. A child who lived in a place called Paradise and ran wild and free across 10 acres of Texas countryside and had never, before that Wednesday, had any reason to be afraid of a man in a delivery truck. Tanner Horner was arrested. He confessed. He told them he panicked. That is where we arrive, at the question this case has never fully answered. Not the legal question, courts handle that. The human question. The one you cannot look away from. Think about the last time you made a mistake that hurt someone. Maybe it was small. A fender bender you didn't want to be held responsible for. A moment at work where you miscalculated and something went wrong, and your first instinct, your absolute first instinct, was to wonder whether anyone saw, whether you could fix it quietly, whether you could avoid the consequence. Most of us have been there, in some small version of that moment, and most of us, faced with that instinct, talked ourselves back from it. We stopped. We admitted what happened. We called for help. The argument Tanner Horner's defense would eventually lean on is that Horner is on the autism spectrum, that he grew up exposed to lead, that his mother drank during pregnancy, that his development was compromised in ways that affected his ability to regulate panic, to think through consequences, to understand the weight of what he was doing in real time. Defense attorney Goebel asked jurors to look at those facts and see a person whose moral blameworthiness was reduced. Wise County District Attorney James Stainton had already told those same jurors that the panic story was, in his words, an absolute lie. that when Horner put Athena in that van, she was uninjured. That the first words out of his mouth to that child were a threat. That what happened in the back of that van was not the frantic, disoriented act of a man overwhelmed by accident, but something deliberate, committed by someone who knew exactly what he was doing and chose to do it anyway. Here is what we know for certain. Athena fought him. His DNA was found under her fingernails. She was 67 pounds. She fought a 250-pound man. And here is the question that has no clean answer. Does the explanation of panic or autism, or a difficult upbringing, or a compromised developmental history, does any of that change what was decided in that van? Because there is a version of this argument that leads somewhere uncomfortable. If we accept that some people, because of their neurology or their history or their moment of crisis, cannot be held to the same moral standard as others, then we have to think carefully about what that means for Athena. It does not return her. It does not change what she experienced. And it does not answer the question of whether the threat he issued to a 7-year-old girl, "Don't scream or I'll hurt you," was panic, or was calculation wearing panic as a mask. Courts have frameworks for this. Juries have been given the task of answering it, at least in the legal sense. The moral sense is something you have to sit with yourself. The trial is currently in its sentencing phase. Tanner Horner pleaded guilty on the 7th of April 2026. The first morning his trial was set to begin, after years of delays and motions and arguments about venue and admissibility and the death penalty. He stood up when the judge asked for his plea and said 2 words: guilty. The punishment phase will determine whether he dies for it or spends his life in prison. Either way, Athena Strand does not come home. But the investigation that caught Tanner Horner in less than 48 hours? That part of the story is worth telling, because it almost didn't happen the way it did. The digital trail that led investigators to Tanner Horner was not a sophisticated operation. It was not the result of some breakthrough forensic technology, or an anonymous tip, or a lucky break in surveillance footage. It was basic detective work, done fast, by people who understood that every hour mattered. Texas Ranger Job Espinoza learned about the delivery on the night Athena went missing. The family mentioned the package. He requested the footage from the company contracted to operate the FedEx vehicles. The company cooperated. The footage came in. Athena was visible, standing, alive. From that footage, investigators had a vehicle. From the vehicle, they had a route. From the route, they had a name. They got Horner on the phone that same evening. They told him they wanted to talk. He agreed to come in, and FBI Special Agent Patrick McGuire, who had been assigned to help, testified at trial that he first made contact with Horner while Horner was still in a meeting with his supervisor at the delivery company. They tracked the digital evidence, route logs, GPS data, phone records. Tanner Horner had been delivering packages all day. Every stop had a timestamp. Every timestamp had a location. The data built a map of everywhere he had been and at what time. Within 2 days, they had him. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because here's the thing about how Tanner Horner was caught. FedEx cooperated. The company responded quickly. The footage was handed over. The route data was accessible. The systems worked. Now consider this. The company that employed Tanner Horner was not FedEx directly. He worked for a third-party contractor, a business hired to handle delivery volume on FedEx's behalf. The driver who came to Athena's house was not, technically, a FedEx employee. He was a contract worker, accountable to a contractor, operating inside a system of outsourced labor and fragmented accountability that is now standard across the delivery industry. This matters because it raises a question that did not become part of the criminal trial but lingered in the background of every news story about the case. Who vets the people who come to your door? Not just FedEx. All of them. Every service, every platform, every app that sends a stranger to your home. Background checks exist, but background checks are not predictive. They catch what someone has already done. They say nothing about what someone is capable of. The box of Barbies that Tanner Horner left by the trailer, the one Ashley Strand ordered for Athena's Christmas present, is still the detail that stops the breath. He delivered her Christmas present. And then he took her. She was 7 years old and she liked the color pink. The town of Paradise held a vigil. Officials in Wise County lit a Christmas tree and pink lights for Athena, who loved the color, who loved Christmas. The image spread across social media and news outlets. A tree covered in rose-colored lights burning against a December sky in a town that had just lost something it couldn't get back. Athena's mother, Maitland Gandy, had driven from Oklahoma. She had been sick when Athena came to stay with the Strand family. Now she was standing at a memorial for her daughter. Photographs of Athena circulated, grinning, gap-toothed, alive, and people who had never met her shared them tens of thousands of times. The investigation that caught Tanner Horner in less than 48 hours would eventually lead to something else. Texas state legislators introduced what became known as the Athena Alert, a bill modeled on the Amber Alert system, designed to speed up the process of notifying the public when a child goes missing without immediate confirmation of an abduction. The Athena Alert would lower that threshold, would allow law enforcement to get information out faster before the window closed. The Texas House passed it. Athena Strand, who wanted to be safe, who wrote about safety in her final school journal entry, had a law named after her. Her teacher, Lindsay Thompson, went back to school on the Monday after Athena died. She went back because her students needed her. Because they were 6 and 7 years old and they knew that something was wrong and they were not old enough to know how to hold it, support counselors came to the school. Activities were organized to help the children process what they were feeling. Children at ages 6 and 7, Thompson told the jury, do not process grief the same way adults do. Neither do the adults, really. They are just better at pretending. Ashley Strand, who had known Athena since she was a year and a half old, who had built a life with her for 7 months in paradise before that Wednesday, Ashley Strand and Jacob Strand divorced after Athena died. The pressure of what happened to that family broke something that could not be repaired. Grief does that. Not in the neat, linear way that stories sometimes describe it. It fractures things along lines you didn't know were there. By the 2nd of December 2022, the body of a 7-year-old girl had been found in a bamboo thicket 9 miles from her home. The man who put her there had confessed. A community of strangers had spent 2 days looking for a child they never found in time. And Tanner Horner sat in a cell waiting for a trial that would take more than 3 years to begin. 3 years, 4 months, and 7 days after Athena Strand disappeared, Tanner Horner walked into the Tim Curry Criminal Justice Center in Fort Worth and sat down at the defense table. The courtroom was full. Supporters of Athena's family wore pink. The trial had been moved out of Wise County after Horner's attorneys argued he couldn't get a fair jury there, that the community had been too close to what happened, too personally affected. So it came to Tarrant County, to a bigger city, to a courthouse full of strangers who had not stood shoulder to shoulder in those fields searching for her. Jury selection had taken months. When it was finally done, when the judge called the room to order and the families settled into their seats and the cameras were positioned, and everyone was prepared for what was expected to be weeks of graphic, devastating testimony, Judge George Gallagher asked Tanner Horner to stand. Mr. Horner, to the charge of capital murder you may plead guilty or not guilty. What is your plea? The courtroom went quiet. Guilty. One word. No drama, no breakdown, no final statement. Just guilty. There is something that happens in a room when a man says that word out loud in front of a judge, after 3 years of delays and motions and arguments and continuances. After 3 years of a family waking up every morning knowing what happened to their daughter and waiting for a system to formally agree, it does not fix anything. It does not return anyone. But it closes something, some procedural door that had been left ajar, some legal fiction that had allowed the question of guilt to technically remain open, even when everyone in every room knew the answer. He said it. The door closed. The case moved immediately into its sentencing phase. The jury that had been assembled to determine guilt now had a different job: decide whether Tanner Horner lives or dies. As of this recording, they are still deciding. There is one detail I keep returning to. Not the confession. Not the footage. Not the DNA, or the bamboo thicket, or the pink Christmas tree, or any of the other facts that the news covered and that courts have now spent years examining. The box of Barbies. Tanner Horner was delivering Athena Strand's Christmas present. Ashley Strand had ordered it weeks earlier, through a Walmart account, to arrive at the Paradise property. She had tucked the order away in the back of her mind, the way parents do with gifts, a quiet piece of anticipation, something to look forward to on Christmas morning. She imagined Athena opening it. She imagined the expression on her face. The box arrived on the afternoon of November 30th. When Ashley Strand walked the property that evening looking for Athena, when she passed the abandoned trailer at the edge of their land, she noticed the box. She barely registered it. She was looking for her daughter. The Barbies inside were labeled, "You can be anything." I do not know what to do with that detail. I do not think you are supposed to do anything with it. It is just true, and it sits there, the way the worst truths sometimes sit quietly, in full view, daring you to look directly at it and still find something to hold on to. Athena Strand wanted to be something. She was already something. She was a child who loved mud and worms and the color pink and the feeling of running free across 10 acres of Texas land. She was a student who turned in her safety journal entry on time. She was a girl who could have a bad day and still end it by saying, "I love you, and we will have a better day tomorrow." She had a mother who loved her, and a stepmother who loved her, and a teacher who still tears up telling a jury about her. She had a community of strangers who drove in from across Wise County and stood shoulder to shoulder in the dark because her face was on a screen and that was enough reason to show up. She had a present waiting under the tree. None of it was enough. Tanner Horner made a choice, whether in panic or in calculation, whether diminished in his capacity or not, whether the law says he should live or die. He made a choice in the back of that van, and Athena Strand's entire possible future closed like a door. There is a law with her name on it now in Texas. It exists because of what happened to her. It may save a child someday. It may close a gap in the alert system that costs precious minutes when minutes are everything. That is not nothing, but it is also not the same as having her back. Paradise, Texas is still a real place. Population roughly 500 people, 60 miles northwest of Dallas. The kind of town where people wave from their driveways and kids run outside after school without being afraid. Most of the time, that is still true. But on one Wednesday in November, a delivery truck came down County Road 3573, and a little girl was outside. And something happened that cannot be explained cleanly by panic or evil or any single word the English language has available. It happened. And the most honest thing anyone can say about it, the thing that cannot be argued or appealed or filed a motion against, is this. She was 7 years old. She deserved to come home. If this story left you thinking about how communities respond when a child goes missing, and whether our systems are fast enough, good enough, in the moments that matter most, then the next story I want you to watch is one you may have thought you knew. A child who was missing for years, in plain sight, and a system that had every piece of information it needed and still failed to connect the dots. That one is next.